I want to welcome in Dylan Combellick. He is a former U.S. Military Russian analyst. He lives in Ukraine, but recently fled to Romania with his family. Dylan, we appreciate you being with us tonight. First of all, tell us about your decision to leave Ukraine.
We just saw the mounting risk of staying in Ukraine, and we decided to leave about the January 30th. And we've been in Romania since then. What
was your experience leaving?
When we left, everything was fairly calm and life was normal. It's my understanding, talking to the people that I know back in Ukraine, that things have gotten a little bit more stressful there, but people are still going to work and still going shopping, and life is more or less normal, although many people have gone to Lviv, and I know a lot of the expats are now leaving the country as well.
What are you hearing from friends and family still there? Are Ukrainians prepared to fight if it comes to that?
Yes. From everything I've seen on the internet and from talking to people, the feeling of patriotism in Ukraine is high, and they are energized and ready for whatever comes.
Are they equipped to do that?
That I don't know. I'm not really familiar with the order of battle of Ukraine, and I think that that's something that we're only going to find out in the future.
Let's talk about, go ahead, I'm sorry.
I know that last night in Mariupol, which is a coastal city in Ukraine, only a few miles from the areas that Russia has invaded, there was a display or a gathering in the town square where they were singing the Ukrainian national anthem. So I think the Ukrainian people are motivated.
And learning to fire weapons, as they have not had to do before. Describe life before you left, certainly since 2014, how things had changed. Many hear about democracy growing and thriving.
The first time I came to Ukraine was actually in 2014. I was just here for a visit. I was here during the Maidan protests. And even during the Maidan protests, life was still going on. Now, I wasn't here during the hottest part of it, but I was here kind of when it was already petering out. But people were still going out to restaurants, and in the center of the city streets, you had people protesting. I've seen steady improvement in Ukraine over the years that I've been coming here. I've only lived here for 2 years. I came here in June of 2020, but even in just that short time, you see things getting better all the time. The roads are being, rebuilt and repaired, and the cities look, every time I go for a walk, I see sidewalks that have been fixed and new stores that are opening. And Ukraine is a country that is embracing capitalism and democracy and freedom.
And tonight, on the brink of war. Dylan, as a military analyst, I know you studied and are very close with Russian relations and are very well versed. Today, as you know, President Biden announced sanctions on Russia. Will this be enough to deter Vladimir Putin?
We can hope so. I haven't had a chance to go through the details of the exact sanctions that have been implemented, but sanctions are slow to take effect. They don't have, an immediate impact, and Putin might be counting on the fact that the West won't be able to maintain the sanctions. I think it's important in this conflict to look at why Putin is so interested in the Donbass area, because there hasn't been a lot of coverage of this. Putin talks a lot about wanting to rescue the Russian people there from some idea of genocide that he invented in his head. This is all just a fantasy that he's created for the Russian people to consume. The real reason that he's looking at Donbass is because Donbass has tremendous natural gas reserves. And if Ukraine was able to develop those natural gas reserves, they would be less dependent upon Russia and be able to decrease the amount of influence that Russia has on Ukrainian politics, and perhaps even on European politics, if Ukraine was able to export some of that gas to Europe, replacing Russia's supply.
So this region that we see here on our screen in red, rich in resources, and it is much more important for Putin to have that as part of Russia than it is for Ukraine to keep it. I want to talk real briefly with you, Dylan, about these so-called peacekeeping troops that Putin ordered into these regions. How much of a threat is that right now?
I think it's a tremendous threat, and right now those troops are moving into the areas that have already been occupied by the Russian invaders for several years, and they're coming into contact with the Ukrainian line in Donetsk and Lugansk, because right now Ukraine still controls about 2/3 of the territory of those two areas. The choice right now is going to be up to Zelensky whether he wants to surrender that territory to Russia or not. And he has given every indication, like the foreign minister of Ukraine said earlier, that they are going to fight for every inch of territory.
And we also saw, Dylan, new tonight, Secretary of State Antony Blinken canceled a meeting with his Russian counterpart over the invasion. Is diplomacy still on the table in your mind?
It doesn't seem so. I think the decisions have already been made in Moscow. We don't know what those decisions are. I think there might be a sense that, I hope there's a sense that Vladimir Putin has bitten off more than he can chew here. And we've had reports from Belarus and also in Russia of the low morale among the Russian troops. There were reports in Belarus that the Russian troops were selling off gasoline and ammunition onto the black market. And there were some Russian troops that got lost in a train station and forgotten about for several days and had to beg the local villagers for food and water. So, and then you have the exact opposite of that on the Ukrainian side, where the Ukrainian troops are highly energized and highly motivated to defend their country. And this is a situation where, especially in the western Ukraine and Kiev and Kharkiv, there are a lot of cross-border families in Ukraine and Russia, and almost everybody I know has relatives in Russia. And so this is going to be a very hard invasion for Putin to justify to the Russian people and to the Russian military. We had a letter from the Retired Generals Association in Russia a few weeks ago telling Putin that invading Ukraine was a bad idea. And he is intent, it appears that he is still intent upon carrying through with this plan. But we'll see. I mean, Zelensky's got this choice ahead of him. Maybe if he retreats to these borders of the Lugansk and Donetsk provinces, I think that maybe Putin is trying to convince him that if the Ukraine retreats out of those provinces, then there won't be an invasion of the entire country. But there's no guarantee of that. And as we've seen, you can't rely on what the Russians say. You have to act upon what they do.
So much at stake tonight. Dylan Combellick, we appreciate you coming on and, importantly, your perspective tonight. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for the opportunity.
Be safe. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.